When I was growing up, Thanksgiving was my favorite holiday. I just loved on Thanksgiving Day how we would go to my mom's parents' house and feast on all the traditional foods. It would be me and my brother, my parents, and my grandparents just feasting on the delicious turkey and mashed potatoes and all of that. And on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we would go to my dad's parents' house. And there, my dad was one of 7, and 5 or 6 of the siblings would gather, along with all my cousins that would go with those aunts and uncles. And we would have roast beef or pork or anything other than more turkey. And at both of these meals, the table was filled with the people who belonged there. My family and my immediate extended family. Now, in graduate school, things started to shift a little bit. My mom's dad had died, and my mom's mom was living in a nursing home, and somehow these 2 meals that had existed my entire life morphed into one giant Thanksgiving meal on Thanksgiving Day. Okay, so far so good. And around the same time, my parents opened a restaurant. And the restaurant was closed on Thanksgiving Day, and it was quickly decided that restaurants are made for meals. And they had industrial dishwashers and big ovens, and let's eat at the restaurant. Okay. So the first time I go home to this Thanksgiving meal of a new combined meal in a new place, we gathered not only around a different table, which was a little bit weird, but I looked around and there were different people there. Now, I was not thrilled because I had to go up to my mom and dad and say, "Psst, who's that?" And they would explain that it was my second cousin so-and-so or my great aunt such and such, and I couldn't remember who these people were. So this table was now suddenly filled with extended family that I didn't quite know, and I wasn't quite sure what they were doing around my table. The next time I went, these extra adult people that were family somehow or other were there, but then there were more people because it was a restaurant, right? And I said, "Who are those people?" And my mom was like, "Oh, that's such and such. We know them from here at the restaurant. They don't have any family, so we invited them to come." I said, "What? They are not supposed to be here. They do not do things the way we do things. They do not know the things we know. Why are those people here?" I was not happy about this newfangled Thanksgiving thing that they had going on. Now, Jesus, on the other hand, spent most of his meals, and we have a lot of stories about Jesus eating, with people who were not his family. We have 0 stories, so far as I know it, of Jesus sharing a meal with Mary and Joseph and maybe some younger siblings that we may or may not know about. We have maybe a couple stories of Jesus having a meal with his best friends. But we have loads of stories of Jesus sharing a meal with other random people. But unlike me, Jesus was not complaining that this was not how meals were supposed to go down. Instead, Jesus is modeling that this is exactly how meals are supposed to be. Now, in our story today that Sharon just read, we are smacked in the face with the fact that Jesus dined with the uncoolest of the uncool in first century society. He didn't hang out with the cool kids. He didn't hang out with people who were going to help him move up the social ladder. He didn't even share the table with the right people, not even a little bit. Instead, he's having a meal at Levi's house. Doesn't sound so bad. But Levi was a tax collector. Now, that still doesn't sound that bad to us. Now, it might sound like a really boring job, but it really is not one of those jobs that we think of would be on like that show, The World's Dirtiest Jobs, or some sort of underground profession that you wouldn't want to put on the doctor's office piece of paper when it asks what you do. It's not one of those jobs, right? Being a tax collector, maybe boring, but not that bad, kind of like meter reader or toll booth collector or something along those lines, right? So in my head, we've got this person sitting in a booth, like when you drive back east and you go through the booth and you put your ticket in and they tell you it's $2.60 for driving along this portion of the highway, and you hand over your money. Kind of a boring job, but fine. But that is not the case in Jesus' day. In Jesus' day, there were two kinds of tax collectors. The first kind was the direct taxes, and they were employed by the Roman Empire, and they collected your land tax and your poll tax. That was the one kind. The other kind was Levi, the toll, the tariff, the custom fee, collected at a toll house, a la a toll booth, right? Now, these people would have paid up front what they thought they might be able to collect. Like, today I think I'm going to collect $20 worth of tolls. So they would have given away their $20 and then set about gathering up the money. Now, abuse and corruption with this strategy was rampant because they wanted to at least make their $20 back and then more, because that was how they would make a living. So now you can imagine Levi in his little toll booth, and he sees the beat-up station wagon coming on up to the toll booth. And he thinks, this guy doesn't know that he owes $2.60. I'm going to tell him $4. And he'll probably get $4 because that's what he said. Then along rolls the Mercedes. How about $6? I think you can give me $6. And along rolls up the brand new Bentley. $10. Maybe $20, depending on how nice it is, what model it is. They try to get as much money as they possibly could because they only owed $20, but if they made $40, they were doing great. So this is how the tax collector of Levi would have tried to squeeze as much money out of every person he could. So needless to say, this was not a profession that was looked kindly upon. In fact, no one liked them because they were scam artists. They were sleazy salesmen, and not the Jewish religious leaders liked them, not the Pharisees, not the Gentiles, not anybody. Remember, those are people that would not normally have agreed on anything. They all agreed tax collectors were the worst. And along comes Jesus. And Jesus strolls on up to that tax collecting booth and says, "Follow me." And Levi gets up and goes and throws Jesus a dinner party. Now, what our story that we heard doesn't tell us is that immediately before this story, so if you read the chapter before it, Jesus heals a paralyzed man. And Jesus tells the man to take up his bed, stand up, and go home. Now, the command to pick up your bed, stand up, and go home is a little bit different than follow me, but the scripture has both of them doing the exact same thing. They arose. They stood up, both of them. The same verb for the one who couldn't previously walk as the one who was a tax collector. They both arise and do as Jesus called them to do. Life for both is changed, altered forever. And from that place of change, Levi throws the dinner party. And Jesus is hanging around the table, enjoying himself, presumably. And both the Pharisees and the scribes we see are grumbling about the company that Jesus is keeping. Jesus doesn't care. He's having a great old time at a dinner party. And he reminds us, the hearers of this story, that he has not come for the ones who are well. He does not come for the ones who don't need a doctor. He has come for the tax collector, for the one most in need. And it is clear that Jesus is doing the rebellious thing when it comes to the company he keeps. That's clear. Nobody hangs out with the tax collectors but Jesus. So as we envision ourselves in this story, I kept thinking this week, with whom do I identify in this story? Now, clearly, based on my Thanksgiving illustration, I am the scribe and the Pharisee grumbling about the company that Jesus is keeping. Who are these people and what are they doing at my dinner table? But I also got to thinking about Levi, the one who Jesus calls to follow and who arises and does just that. And the more I sat with this, I realized that it's a little bit of both. Now we grumble, I'm probably not the only one, maybe I am, and then I'll just preach to myself, like the scribes and the Pharisees about the company that Jesus kept and asks us to keep. I don't really want to hang out with people that are that different. I don't really want to open my doors to those people, whoever those people might be, those unacceptable in my social circle. I don't really want the stranger at my dinner party. But we are reminded by the rebellious Jesus that that is exactly who should be invited to our dinner party. The guests that when others peek in our windows will say, now what are they doing there? They don't really belong there. We are reminded that the rebellious Jesus wants our church to fling wide our doors and welcome those that are not welcome many other places. As we hear this story, we are reminded that we have work to do in accepting the other, whoever that other might be. But we also are reminded that in a lot of ways, we are the tax collector, that less than perfect person, the one who does things we probably shouldn't do, the one in need of Jesus calling us and inviting us. We all want and need to be invited by Jesus. None of us are so pure and so perfect that we don't need Jesus, that we don't need to be welcomed at God's enormous table. We want to be reminded that nothing, absolutely nothing, not a single big thing, not a single small thing that we have done will keep us from being invited. Because there's no do not invite list. So whether we are the cool kid who always sat at the cool kid lunch table or the socially awkward, unacceptable one, we are invited to God's cool kid table. We are invited to dine with Jesus because Jesus has called each of us to follow. Now, it's not an easy call because we have to host parties that we don't want to host. And we have to welcome people that it's not comfortable to welcome. But it means that we, you, me, with all our imperfections and our missteps and our stumbles, that we are invited to the table too. All of us. No matter what. And for that, we say thanks be to God. Amen.